Chapter 11 Randomness, Order, and Purpose. The late physicist Heinz Pagel, in Cosmic Code, demonstrates that 20th century physics and mathematics have yet to produce a definition for randomness. What is there about randomness that defies the construction of a meaningful and useful definition? Heinz Pagel states the irony of randomness. In part, the problem of precisely defining randomness, or more specifically a random sequence of integers, is that if you succeed in giving an exact definition, the sequence may no longer be random. Being able to say precisely what randomness is denies the very nature of randomness, which is utter chaos. How can you be precise about chaos? When a random sequence of integers is precisely defined, its randomness may be defined away. What is there about precision, definitions, and understanding that deny the nature of randomness? True randomness is a part of disorder and chaos. To have knowledge of disorderly and chaotic processes is to also have an internal contradiction. To be knowledgeable of something, it is first necessary to reach a definition of that something. Acquiring information, knowledge of a system is to create order out of an initial state of disorder, ignorance. Randomness, with its related disorder and chaos, is part of ignorance and the inability to define. How can randomness be defined when it is part of non-defined state? Continuing observation, information, of a random sequence of integers reveals areas of non-randomness. Integers have a certain value, and there is an orderly determination of the difference of value between them. Each integer retains a constant value which is not random. The integers occupy set locations definable by their specific positional relationships to each other and to the observer or to anything else that may be involved. The conventional distance between integers is usually the same, which is certainly not random. Taking a random sequence of integers and applying it to a combination lock makes it definable, non-random, in its relationship to the lock. The observed so-called random integers have a set positional relationship to the observer which is definable. To observe any object's positional relationship to other objects makes it definable and non-random through this positional relationship. Definitions create the positional relationships between objects. A physical object is defined by the non-physical space adjacent to it, and the non-physical space is defined by the physical adjacent to that space. Position provides stationary events for measuring, defining 0 and 1 relationships. The problem of undefinable randomness can be solved by relating it to its opposite, non-randomness. Non-randomness is the positional process of relationships brought about through absorption, observation, and is the defining process accomplished by positional absorption. The non-randomness of definitions is knowledge preceded by randomness with its non-defining ignorance. The zero of random's ignorance is always a necessary prior condition to the one of non-random's knowledge, non-ignorance. Human observation is the non-random event of mental position used for relating one thing to another. The opposite is the ignorance and randomness involved with the emotional emission necessary to reach positional absorption. Again, there is a return to emission and absorption for explaining universal action and the human vocabulary describing this action. The wave function refers to all motion, which includes randomness, chaos, chance, uncertainty, indeterminacy, and disorder. All of these terms relate to the infinite possibilities of absorption during motion, wave. The zero has an infinite number of specific locations along the path of motion for reaching position. There are an infinite number of positional possibilities prior to any one of them being activated. It is this infinity of possibilities of position that requires nature to be involved with random, chance, chaos, uncertainty, indeterminacy, and disorder. Nature cannot predetermine its destination, when emission is faced with infinite possibilities of absorption. The possible is indeterminate and uncertain until absorption takes place. When emission, wave, reaches the human act of looking, absorption, we change random to non-random, indeterminacy to determinacy, disorder to order, uncertainty to certainty, and chaos to non-chaos. The role of the dice initiating motion is a human confrontation with chance, randomness, uncertainty, indeterminism, chaos, and disorder. When the motion, emission, of the dice stops, the wave collapses for the dice and the human observers. The human state of actualization is reached because the dice have reached a positional state where the numbers are discernible. The negative opposites during the wave have now been reversed to the positive opposites because of the positive addition of arrival. The negative question has changed to the positive answer. This is another example of how opposites require each other. When a physicist wants positional knowledge of a particle during a wave function, this is the same as wanting positional knowledge of the dice number during the roll of the dice. Ignorance is the non-arrival stage that is always a prior condition to knowledge and the arrival stage. There is now a wave to solve the problem of defining randomness. Randomness is the non-defining state required to reach the defining state of mental arrival. To observe cannot, then, be random because it defines a positional relationship between the observer and the observed. Randomness is the inability to know where things are relative to ourselves because we have not yet observed. When humans observe, they convert randomness to non-randomness. When observing, a sequence of positional relationships become known to the observer. Randomness is defined as the state of not having a definition. Randomness is a non-definable state for the mind. Non-definitions are necessary to reach definitions, and conversely. Randomness is the opposite state for reaching the non-random state. A random sequence of integers is a statement of our inability to reach the knowledgeable state of an orderly, non-chaotic, and non-random state of integers. Randomness can be said to be a state of ignorance. By increasing the number of positional relationships, we increase the defining process of observation necessary to reach non-randomness, knowledge. Randomness is a lack of perception, observation, which can lead to a successful perception, non-random. Order 1 and disorder 0. It has been said by scores of important scientists that all attempts to obviate or refute the second law of thermodynamics will come to absolute and utter failure. Embarking on a critique of this most prominent law of physics is like going where those proverbial angels fear to tread. Nonetheless, there is more to learn about this formidable law. The subject of the second law of thermodynamics will be briefly discussed. As every physics student knows, the second law of thermodynamics deals with the measurement of disorder in the universe, and that measurement is commonly referred to as entropy. This law proclaims a universe tending toward disorder that will eventually reach a state of total entropy. Total entropy is a complete state of disordered energy. Disordered energy is said to be energy in a state where it can no longer be used in its transfer patterns from one object to another. Energy is said to still exist, but it is no longer useful for energy exchange. The eventual result is the complete loss of the availability of useful energy for continuing universal action. This also has been called the heat death of the universe. It is stated that in the end of the universe, one temperature will prevail without the thermal differences necessary for motion energy. The necessary high energy to low energy relationships for the continuation of universal action are said to be lost. This pessimistic law predicting the death of the universe may have been devised due to the failure to identify the role of the zero in energy's relationship to order and disorder. By demonstrating the relationship of energy to order and disorder, and that this relationship is fundamental to emission and absorption events, there emerges a different view of the availability of energy. Ignorance is the zero of the empty state of disorder for humans. Knowledge is the filled one state of order for humans. With the fill of absorption, we reach a state of knowledge that changes disorder 0 into order 1. This is the fill of a mental zero, but there are other human zeros to be filled and emptied. For humans, every fill with arrival creates a state of order 1, and every empty with the departure of order and the emergence of the zero creates a state of disorder. Human absorption and order 1 produces emission and disorder 0 for other related objects. For every state of order, absorption producing the fill, there is also a state of disorder, emission producing the empty somewhere. When there is a fill, there is also an empty. Converting disorder into order in one area creates a conversion of order into disorder in another area. This balances disorder and order, allowing the zero of a disorderly empty state to always be available for reaching another one of an orderly filled state. New order 1 always produces new disorder 0, and conversely, emerging disorder provides an emerging order. A natural balance between order and disorder is always maintained. The one of the matter state of order is conserved, and the zero of the antimatter state of disorder is conserved. Energy is motion for emission energy output, and energy is motion for reaching absorption energy input. Disorder is a result of energy output emission, and order is the result of energy input absorption. Energy input and output create order and disorder, and one cannot occur without the other. Neither the magnitude of energy output disorder nor energy input order can decrease or increase over each other, because one cannot occur without the previous condition of the other. Energy, an object's motion, always has the availability of a zero for input and output in transferring its energy motion from one object to another. When we interact with our surroundings, there is an exchange of order and disorder. All interactions in nature involve the exchange of matter and antimatter states through the use of motion energy. The matter state is the positive of order plus, and the antimatter state is the negative of disorder minus. Whenever a house is in a negative condition, it represents holes that are available for filling. To reach the positive, we use the additive process of filling the empty negative. But with every positive addition, we also create a negative subtraction. When the food is cleared off the table and put on the refrigerator shelf, the refrigerator gains more positive from its filling, and the table gains more negative from its emptying. The refrigerator has reached a state of greater order, and the table has reached a state of greater disorder. This state of disorder for the table is a necessary prior condition for returning to the ordered state. The usefulness of both states can be seen because they provide an oscillation back and forth between the two states. One is always available for reaching the other. In house cleaning, the goal is to return order 1 and disorder 0 to the proper state of readiness, so these 1 and 0 states can be readily exchanged. House cleaning creates a balance for reaching emission to absorption events of choice. A dirty dish requires washing to bring it back to the disordered 0 and empty negative state before the dish can reach another ordered 1 and filled positive state. For human survival, it is important to keep these 0 and 1 states ready for use. Humans cannot fill other systems or fill their own systems unless the prior empty stage disorder is available to them. Nature requires this 0 and 1 balance for a stable universe. The question follows, with this new binary perspective of order and disorder, how can the universe reach a total state of disorder, entropy, when disorder must always be in balance with order, the opposite of entropy? Opposites must always be in balance. Interpreting nature's laws is entirely different when the zeros are co-equal companions to the ones. Disorder is defined as the empty antimatter state of any object, and order is defined as the filled matter state of any object. This definition of order and disorder defines a universe that is in an overall balanced state. Frequency is the emission and absorption oscillation that each structure uses for survival. When order and disorder exchanges do not occur, then the structure will make way for those structures that produce this equilibrium. The second law of thermodynamics predicts this entropic pessimism for the future of the universe on the assumption that the universe is a closed system. Corollary number 9, the rule that to know one opposite is to know the other opposite, and that opposites cannot stand alone, indicates that a closed concept cannot stand alone. When one system is closed, it requires that another system be opened. In this case, a closed system refers to the filled orderly state, while the open system refers to the empty disorderly state. It is erroneous and misleading to refer to nature as being involved with only one opposite and not to the other opposite. Nature's action is a rhythmic, antonymic fluctuation between the open antimatter state and the closed matter state. The second law of thermodynamics defines the universe as a closed system where there is no input or output of energy. The question arises, How is a closed system possible without energy input and output when the universe is composed of systems using energy input and output? How can we create a closed system outside of a universe of systems that by nature must maintain a balance between empty states of antimatter, disorder, and filled states of matter, order? In defining any system, its definition must include oscillations between the absorption of energy input and the emission of energy output. Systems cannot exist that do not both open and close. The systems of the universe can only exist through energy input and outputs. To hypothecate the universe as a closed system without energy inputs or outputs is to hypothecate an enigma. The existence of the universe is dependent upon these binary oscillations. To say the universe is closed is to negate the open 0 and closed 1 requirements for its existence. The prediction of a universe that reaches a state of disordered and non-useful energy is derived from an incomplete understanding of the nature of energy. In Chapter 8, mass and energy are discussed, and energy is defined as motion. In a universe of only disordered energy, it is said that there are no thermal differences and that motion cannot proceed without a thermal temperature difference. Because energy is motion, this entropic hypothesis of classical physics produces an internal contradiction. If energy is motion, then a state of no motion indicates a state of no energy. The concept of disordered energy proclaims the existence of energy without the ability to use energy. However, if energy is motion and a complete state of disordered energy means non-motion, as in the heat death of the universe, then instead of disordered energy, we have a state of non-energy, non-motion. Disordered energy, we have a state of non-energy, non-motion. This paradoxical conception of the universe violates the law of the conservation of energy. The pessimism inherent in the second law of thermodynamics arises from the failure to precisely define energy. All opposites are related to each other through the 0 and the 1. Hot and cold are opposites. Hot has a greater frequency of in and out processes than the cold. To produce a hot area means transferring greater motion energy from one area to another. Hot is motion energy input that also produces cold from an adjacent energy output. Having a hot area also means having a cold area. For motion/energy to arrive, it must depart elsewhere. Arrival without departure is impossible. The hot of more energy also produces the cold of less energy. A hot condition with the addition plus of energy in one area means a cold condition with a subtraction minus of energy in another area. Excess hot must yield somewhere else a deficit cold, and a deficit cold must yield somewhere else an excess hot. The compaction of hot generates the refraction of cold. Thus, balance and symmetry is maintained. How can total entropy and the heat death, a universal homogeneous temperature of the universe, be reached when all energy inputs, heat, require energy outputs, cold? In a binary universe, a viable difference in temperature throughout the universe will always be maintained. A continuing difference in temperature is a statement for the continuing maintenance and accessibility of the 0 and 1 for each other. It is commonly stated that hot always flows to cold. If hot represents more of the 1 in these in and out oscillations, and cold more of the 0 with less filling and emptying of the 1, then there is an elegant explanation of why hot flows to cold. The cold creates more zeros for the occupation of the hot ones. The one's motion energy approaches the zeros for entering. This demonstrates the attraction force. Hot represents more energy necessary to move to the cold of less energy. For cold zeros to approach hot ones, for the zeros to be entered, the cold zeros must utilize motion energy. In the same way, human motion energy is used to move the zero of a cold drink toward the one of a hot human body. Motion energy is used to move zeros toward ones and ones towards zeros, or both toward each other, and motion energy is used to replace disorder with order. But the new order will produce new disorder at some other place. Motion energy is necessary for the oscillations of order 1 and disorder 0. Arrival and order is accomplished through energy input creating energy output disorder to another input order to output transformation. Energy output means energy is always available for another energy input. And conversely, energy input means energy is always available for another energy output. Energy is motion that converts order to disorder and disorder to order. The natural necessity of having order and disorder where one cannot consume the other applies to all opposites. The infinite nature of the universe can be shown through the mutual dependency of opposites. Let us examine the concept of a beginning and an end. Beginning is the start of motional emission for an object, and ending is the arrival of positional absorption for an object. It is easier to understand that the end, stop of motion, is defined through the beginning, start of motion. But it is harder to understand that the beginning, start of motion is defined through a previous end, stop of motion. The beginning of emission is not possible unless a position for the start of emission is provided by absorption. Absorption provides the starting position for all motion, emission. Similarly, absorption is not possible without emission. To start means the previous stop of arrival, and a stop means a previous start of departure. To have a starting point for emission requires absorption, position. Infinity is built into the interdependence of all opposites in the universe. Beginnings and endings are cyclic events that depend upon each other because it is impossible to have one without the other. Now, the old chicken and egg paradox of priority can be explained. The unfertilized egg is in an empty, disorderly antimatter state waiting to reach a filled and orderly matter state of fertilization and development of the chicken. The disorder of the egg is a prior condition to the order of the chicken. Also, the order of the chicken is a prior condition to the disorder of the egg. A fill chicken is necessary to come to an empty egg, and an empty egg is necessary to come to a fill chicken. All viable, oscillating, emitting, and absorbing objects have infinity built into them. To ask which came first, the chicken or the egg, is a meaningless question when dealing with opposites, and that is all there is to deal with. There can be no firsts when opposites are involved, as in the chicken and the egg. They cycle one after the other. Humans also have cyclical order 1 and disorder 0 events, which represents an infinite past. All endings require a prior beginning, and all beginnings require a prior ending. The dynamics of opposites reveal an infinite universe. The physical is the local finite using the infinite nature of the non-local non-physical. The non-physical has infinite possibilities for its infinite organization by the finite physical. The non-local zero provides infinite possibilities for the local finite one to organize the zero for the one's fill, order, and empty, disorder. Our entire lives involve making messes and cleaning them up. A mess follows the enjoyment or gain of making the mess in the first place. Satisfaction is found in the utilization and occupation of holes that are necessary for humans to fill their spaces, holes. When the filling process of order is complete, the displaced items that remain are perceived as unwanted disorder. However, the real disorder is the zero of the empty containers, for example, shelves, where the now unused items belong for their proper storage. By replacing these items where they belong for storage, we restore order to the storage containers by filling their holes. When we return our unused food on the table to the refrigerator shelves, the refrigerator now has more order because its spaces are filled. The table now has more disorder because its spaces are unfilled. It may appear that a return to a clean, empty space on the table would represent order instead of disorder, but the cleaning and maintenance of the table's holes maintains disorder by creating more space 0, so that the fill of order 1 can be readily accomplished again. By restoring order through filling the storage containers, we have cleaned up the mess. The cleaning of the mess from the table's surface now brings us back to an empty, disordered state necessary for another filled and orderly state. Where humans fill spaces, they replace disorder with order, and where spaces are emptied, they replace order with disorder. Having access to well-maintained spaces is having access to orderly fill processes. We usually consider a clean and well-maintained spatial area as orderly. However, the space is disorderly because it enables greater accessibility for the occupation of order. Disorder invites the order. We clean to provide the disordered state for the possibility 1 to 0 of reaching the ordered state. Energy's involvement in these balanced events of order and disorder indicates energy's continual use. Instead of its non-use, in sharp contrast to the second law of thermodynamics and its dismal prediction of a universal heat death. The continuing exchanges of balanced ones and zeros conserve the dynamics of energy usage. The changing universe remains in balance between matter 1 and antimatter 0 states, between balanced states of positive plus and negative minus charges. Energy used through input 1 and output 0 produces changes while maintaining equilibrium. Energy is motion used by the one in providing equal states of the open through energy output and the closed through energy input. Open processes require closed processes elsewhere and conversely. The universe oscillates between both open 0 and closed 1 systems. The infinite nature of order closed and disorder open is a necessary part of energy. How is it possible to produce entropy of and non-useful energy when energy's output emission phase is dependent upon its input absorption phase, and the input of absorption is dependent upon the output of emission? Energy must oscillate between the positive addition of its input and the negative subtraction of its output. The conclusion is that order and disorder are opposites with the root sources, the 1 and the 0. Each depends upon the other for their complementary existence. The universe will not perish from the complete disorder that is predicted by the second law of thermodynamics. The balance and equilibrium between energy input and output will always be conserved. The conservation of useful energy is joined with a conservation of the physical 1 and non-physical 0. This is explained by the introduction of the 0 and its relationship to the 1 of the physical world. Disorder 0 cannot surpass order 1 in magnitude, as order cannot surpass disorder in magnitude. There are local concentrations of order or disorder, but when order accumulates in one place, disorder accumulates in another place, and conversely. Disorder cannot gain on order and order cannot gain on disorder because one cannot occur without the other. According to the second law of thermodynamics, disorder is a destructive process leading to the death of the universe. But departing from this dismal view, disorder, entropy, is an important and necessary process leading to the continuing life of the universe. Disorder can be explained as a reversible form of death, 0, that is necessary to reach the order 1 of life, 1. This follows the principle of using a negative 0 to reach a positive 1. Purpose. In Science, Order, and Creativity, David Bohm and David Peat discuss the Hamilton-Jacobi theory, showing that equations within the theory can be derived from the variation principle. Newton's approach to motion was based on the idea of differential equation that describes motion as a succession of steps in which each state follows continuously from the preceding one in a fashion that is typical of mechanical systems. The variation principle, by contrast, starts not from a differential equation, in which the motion is analyzed into infinitesimal steps, but from an integral which depends upon the whole trajectory over a finite period of time. This integral is called a Lagrangian, and the variation principle approaches motion as if a particle were attempting to minimize its Lagrangian. The motion of a principle in this approach depends upon a whole period of time, rather than, as suggested by Newton, upon a succession of instantaneous mechanical reactions to an external force. The Hamilton-Jacobi theory is therefore determined by something that approaches teleology. It appears as if all motion is governed by the need to attain an end. Bohm and Peat go on to say that the implications of the Hamilton-Jacobi theory may lead to fruitful new insights into the age-old question as to whether or not there is a teleology in nature, and if so, what it means. Teleologists look for evidence of a design and purpose in nature. Newton's approach to motion is that of a succession of steps where each stage follows continuously from the preceding one, allowing motion to be analyzed through a succession of reactions. Newton accomplishes this analysis of motion by placing position, arrival, on the object while it is in motion, departure. The succession of steps and reactions is accomplished by having position always a part of motion. This is necessary to understand motion and its changes at any given moment. However, as has been said, Newton's positions are assumed positions and not actual positions for the object in motion. The reality of motion is distorted when we say, when the object was here, here, and here during motion. This explains its motion. Instead, this distortion of motion is replaced by if the object had been here, here and here during motion, this would be the result. The same result with a different explanation of causality. The variation principle takes the trajectory of motion over a whole period of time. From past discussions, this means a time occurrence at the beginning of motion to a time occurrence at the end of motion. What is the difference between this and Newton's approach? The Lagrangian integral surrounds motion with position, time, instead of requiring position, time, to always be a part of motion. It differentiates the start of motion, emission, from a state of time, absorption, and the end of motion when reaching another state of time, absorption. Newton, however, always uses time, position, as a part of motion. The Lagrangian integral shows the actual separation in nature between motion and position, time, with time occurring both before and after motion. A finite period of time is treated as a finite period for motion, which can show motion's beginning from position, time, and its end by reaching a new position, time. Time surrounds motion at the start and end of motion. Newton always included position as a part of motion. However, motion and time, position, are separate entities in their occurrence. Motion is used to reach time, position, rather than time being continuously involved with motion. The position, time of absorption can be assumed during emission, but in actuality, positional time has not yet occurred. The Lagrangian integral is unique because it separates positional time from motion by showing a whole, complete, finite period for motion. A whole, complete period for motion occurs by the positional/time for the beginning of motion and the positional/time for the end of motion. The Lagrangian integral uses time as a positional notation to identify the start and stop of motion. This raises the question, why does motion start and stop, begin and end? By separating emission, motion, from absorption, position, a new perspective of motion emerges. Motion with a direction toward ends or goals. Instead of being simultaneous, the separation of position and momentum create the necessary difference for cause and effect relationships. The cause of motion is the reach for a new effect of position. In other words, the cause of emission is the reach for a new effect of absorption. The Hamilton-Jacobi theory alludes to motion's attainment of an end goal. The presence of a goal for motion can be derived because position is not introduced as a part of motion. According to the Hamilton-Jacobi theory, the position required for the starts and stops of motion does not have to be simultaneous with motion. The true cause of motion has been obscured by Newton's differential equations, in which there is no separation of the cause and effect stages of motion and position. Cause and effect always include two sequential stages. Motion and position express cause and effect, where the cause of motion is a reach for the effect of position, but by requiring motion and position to be simultaneous, physicists also require cause and effect to be simultaneous. This negates causality. The Lagrangian integral of a whole finite period for motion cannot occur unless the limits of motion are present. The limiting factors for showing a finite path for motion are the beginning and the end of motion. These beginning and end limits are specific locations of position necessary for defining a specific period for the particle's motion. There are two holes involved: the hole that is excited for the beginning of motion and the hole that is entered for the end of motion. The goal of motion is to reach a new position. An explanation of motion will never be discovered as long as it is believed that position is a part of motion instead of position being the purpose of motion. There you have it. The why of human motion is related to the purpose of human motion. Why is there human motion? To accomplish the purpose of a successful arrival and its enjoyment, we use motion to arrive for the filling of our internal and external spaces with the physicals of choice. We move our space to the physical of choice, or we move the physical of choice to our space. These successful filling events become the source of happiness. Some may ask, is this all there is to the purpose of life? Determining the destination and finding a path to reach that destination is the essence of all human challenges. Success, achievement, and fulfillment are all reached through the completion of the journey. The ending of a successful journey adds the necessary knowledge position to undertake another journey. Continuing success enhances our self-confidence and encourages us to seek and find greater adventures. Positional absorption for the human body is the purpose of human life, and the motion of energy is the means to its end. All the energy in nature is directed toward this goal. The direction of motion/energy for reaching position is provided by the forces of attraction and repulsion. The rewards associated with reaching destinations are not the dull and repetitive daily journeys that often confront us. But these same journeys were once important and exciting moments when these motion-to-position events were first accomplished. The excitement of life is in finding and taking new paths toward new goals. The trodden paths can become boring and uneventful. Excitement follows the unexpected events of attempting new directions. The energy acquired and used for building and traveling on new roads represents the price paid for reaching the life event of position. The price of energy is in the production of energy and the effort required for its use in solving problems during the journey. One of the great human challenges for us is to become galactic absorbers. The motivation for all human action is to fill our spaces for the attainment of human goals. Universal action involves the energy used in reaching absorption. The human mind first establishes mental position, knowledge, and then the mind commands the body's motion for physical position. The adventures of life spring from new motion to position events. This concept of universal purpose provides enough meaning, at least for me, for identifying the purpose of life. The attraction force between humans and nature is for human individuals to have their holes filled. Human success is to fill other spaces so our spaces can be filled. To survive, we enter other spaces so our spaces can be entered. We provide love, fill, for others so we can be loved, filled by others. We occupy to be occupied. We communicate to receive communication. We give to receive. We provide value to receive value. We sow new life to reap new life. We originate a positive fill for others to receive a positive fill for ourselves. We provide absorption to be an absorber. We become a creator to receive creation. We supply position to gain position. We produce goods and services to receive goods and services. We create solutions for others to receive solutions from others. Furnishing fills for others to receive fills from others is how people endure as a civilization. It is always possible to take something without giving something in return, but this leads to destruction. A durable human species and a durable civilization must create an endless series of mutually valuable exchanges, value given for value received. To gain an effective positive fill, a positive must also be given. It is the marketplace that provides these exchanges necessary for human survival. When an individual allows someone or something else to reach absorption, then he can become an absorber. We provide life to receive life. It is through the existence of negatives that the positives of the marketplace are developed. Without negative problems, there are no positive solutions to sell in the open market. The problems of life are essential for creating and selling solutions in the marketplace. If problems ceased, the positional goals of life's challenges would also cease. If there are no challenges, all the solutions are already known. The effort involved in problem solving gives value to life. The market sells solutions. Without the presence of the difficult, uncontrollable, and unmanageable conditions of life, how can the easy, controllable, and manageable conditions become a part of life? When losses occur, it stimulates the demand for solutions to remove these losses. The knowledge of preventing future losses is the gain produced from losses. Solutions are traded in the marketplace so that people can solve the problems to regain the control necessary for their survival. If you pay me for my solution to your problem, I gain the means to purchase solutions to my problem. In the continuing market, we solve more and more problems, allowing us to take on greater and greater challenges, problems. The greater the loss, problem, the greater the possible gain, solution. The zero is always the problem, and how to fill the zero is always the solution. The zero is infinite in its capacity to create problems. There will always be challenges of perpetual problems leading to solutions. There have always been those who have insisted on seizing solutions without providing them. Such unilateral gains can be made on a large scale through war or on a small scale through individual theft. In either case, value is taken without providing it. This creates a problem, but not for the one who has confiscated the solution, property. Who has the problem? The one who has confiscated the property or the one who lost his property? The producer of value, solutions, who has lost his property, has the problem. When theft occurs, the thief has created a solution for himself. The victim, by allowing his property to be seized, has contributed to a problem for himself. Over time, if there are too many takers of value from too many victims, there will be no more taking because there will be no more value, property left to take. In the end, this results in the demise of humans and their civilization. Historically, the fault has focused on the thieves who steal value without exchanging value. The fault has been misdirected. It lies with those who are unable to protect their valuables, property. A responsibility always goes with ownership. Ownership means that the owner must assume the responsibility for the retention and maintenance of his property. It is yours to enjoy only if you can keep it safely in your possession. The thief does not have the problem. The victim who has lost his solutions, goods and services, has the problem. The removal of the problem of theft begins with the victim's creation of a solution to prevent this unilateral confiscation of his created wealth. It is incumbent upon the one who has the problem to solve it. When solved, the solution can be sold in the market to provide solutions for others. The problems generated by theft can be approached as either an opportunity to solve a problem or by sitting back and waiting for the thieves to stop stealing. Every problem can be treated as a challenge and an opportunity for one's own development and advancement in search of solutions. Taking and successfully meeting the challenge is the reason for human evolution. Without continuing the problem-solving process, human evolution will cease. Individuals cannot solve every problem, but the market can allow the purchase of solutions for those unsolved problems. It is important to emphasize that the existence of human problems allows the existence of human solutions, which result in the advancement and survival of the species. Problems are losing situations necessary to the development of solutions that bring winning situations. Humans must continue to be involved in the endless cycle of both losing and winning to gain the ongoing challenges necessary for progress and survival. Selfish motivation is the process for the individual self to reach a filling and absorbing process. This may appear to many to be a selfish act. Many people believe selfishness is a deplorable human trait, but the necessity of a marketplace to attain high quality living and long-term survival indicates that the selfish desires of human absorption must be accompanied by providing absorption for something or someone else. To be selfish in an effective way is to also provide selfish situations for others. The market creates this situation through the trading of selfish desires. Without a selfish nature, humans would not exist. The ability to coexist is a direct result of the selfish acts of creating value for ourselves and then using this value to trade for the value generated by the selfish acts of others. All value arises from the effort involved in self-created problems leading to self-created solutions. Truly successful people, of necessity, create success for others and are part of the success of others. Within the selfishness of others, there is value provided to others. True success comes from exchanging the value of solutions, yours for theirs. It is not a one-way flow. Those who build meaningful lives for themselves will of necessity add meaning to the lives of others. Long-term success in our time requires one person's success to be part of another person's success. Self-motivation includes the spin-off motivating others. Perhaps the concept of selfish should be redefined. Selfish acts of providing solutions for ourselves can become market products, which in turn are purchased to become selfish products for the solutions of others. The market facilitates reaching good through bad and creating winning conditions out of losing conditions. The market provides a measure of value by revealing what will work and what will not work. The market becomes the basis for a successful and progressive society. The opposite of selfishness is unselfishness. Unselfishness leads to the non-accomplishment of selfish desires. To not effect absorption for oneself leaves one in an empty state, unable to gain value, through exchanging with others. The inability to fill oneself leads to the death of oneself while living. To have and enjoy life is to live for oneself. It is impossible to live for others because to experience life events is to fill one's own spaces that are part of oneself. A life event means accomplishing a fill for yourself. To rely on others for life, without returning life, is a contradiction because in reality it increases a form of death, while alive. This is a negation of absorption for oneself. To receive value without returning value is to negate life. To be able to return value indicates self-effort in filling your own spaces through solving your own problems. Even in the final stages of old age, one must absorb and fill his internal spaces with food and air. Life is the ability to oscillate to the stage of absorption. Following the binary principle of opposites, selfishness, 1, is a positive and non-selfishness, 0, is a negative. All humans oscillate between the selfish state of success and the non-selfish state of failure. The inability to reach the selfish condition of the fill only becomes a survival threat by not replacing it with a solution and the ability to fill. This redefines the popular concept of selfishness and unselfishness. Selfishness is a successful fill for one's self, and non-selfishness is an unsuccessful fill for one's self. Those acts where someone only gives to others may appear to be non-selfish, but in such cases, the giver is also the receiver. The enjoyment of giving comes from a selfish motivation. Humans live to enjoy the gain of spatial fulfillment. It may appear that some others live to inflict pain upon themselves, but in some way, their final goal is to gain spatial fulfillment. For many, the selfish gain of mental rewards is sufficient spatial fulfillment. Selfish motivation is to reach a fill for oneself. However, the fills necessary for human survival are those successful fills for oneself that also provide successful fills for others. This prescribes a foundation for individual and societal success. Those who attack lives and property of others attempt to fill themselves by emptying others. The marketplace comprises positive for positive exchanges. The thief, destroyer, operating outside the marketplace gains a positive by imposing a negative upon others. But this negative loss can lead to a positive gain if the negative problem is used to arrive at a new positive solution. In other words, imposed negatives provide the motion to find useful positives. Humans will continue to survive if they can convert wrong directions into reaching right directions. Right directions follow the paths that lead to the filling of the holes of choice. Wrong directions follow the paths that cannot lead to the filling of the holes of choice. If human perfection were to be reached by following only right, perfect directions to the hole of choice, no new products would be necessary, and therefore the marketplace would be unnecessary. Without problems to solve, we lose new directions, challenges, and purpose. This new interpretation of nature has been presented as concisely as possible. The final test of an idea's value in the long run is its usefulness. For myself, this binary approach to understanding reality has been especially useful. It has been invaluable in forming my attitudes in how to approach and explain difficult problems. Individuals revolve around the cyclic events of summer 1 and winter 0. An earth without winter is an earth without summer, and the metaphor is extendable to human cycles of winters and summers. This is reminiscent of the words of the influential American writer Thomas Paine. Paine's crisis papers became a profound source of inspiration for both the leaders and followers of the American Revolution to complete the revolution and expel British authorities from the colonies. It was a critical time for the beginning stages of what was to become the United States of America. The first crisis papers were read by officers to soldiers in their ranks prior to the successful winter battle at Trenton, New Jersey. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. 'Tis dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. As the crisis papers were propelling the revolution, the American colonies were in a state of yin. The empty phase was at its pinnacle. Paine, with his masterful metaphors, demonstrated that the yin 0 of winter was necessary to reach the yang 1 of summer. That tyranny, hell, and the trying of souls is prerequisite to freedom, heaven, peace, and the tranquility of the soul. That the harder it is to obtain something, the greater the reward upon attainment, and the price of the good things of life is paid for with the bad. That the easier it is to get something, the less value we place upon it. That failure is a prior condition to success, and weakness must come before strength. That the greater the darkness, winter and cold, the more intense the sunshine, summer and warmth. That the more pronounced the empty of the yin, the more profound the fullness of the yang. And the greater the agony of emission, the greater the ecstasy of absorption. Summer soldiering and sunshine patriotism is the rule. Humans tend to always want the good times, but nature does not work that way. The winter of yin, 0, is a requirement for the summer of yang, 1. If the adversities of winter are ignored, it can destroy us. The winter of problems is nature's design for the summer of solutions. Survival goes to those who respond to the bad by reaching the good. This is nature's way. The trying times in our lives are empties, 0, available for reaching the fills, 1. The emptiness of winter makes possible the fullness of summer. The philosophy of binary opposites is aimed at unifying human action and natural phenomena. An integration of science and biological processes is necessary for demonstrating a better approximation of nature's reality. Adherence to the scientific method and its predictions has given me convincing evidence that the philosophy of binary 0 and 1 opposites is correct. I will follow this course as long as the predictions of natural phenomena continue to hold true of observation. For human survival, investigations of the world must be ongoing. The limits of knowledge can never be reached, and a move in the wrong direction can always be part of finding the right direction. And the purpose of finding a correct path is to reach a better path. In conclusion, I will make a few final statements about gravitation and the importance of Einstein's general theory of relativity. His theory is an elegant mathematical expression of gravity. In the Tao of Physics, the physicist Fritjof Capra provides one of the clearest statements I have seen on the general theory of relativity. It goes right to the heart of what gravity represents. Matter and empty space, the full and the void, were the two fundamentally distinct concepts on which the atomism of Democritus and of Newton was based. In general relativity, these two concepts can no longer be separated. Wherever there is a massive body, there will also be a gravitational field, and this field will manifest itself as the curvature of the space surrounding that body. We must not think, however, that the field fills the space and curves it. The two cannot be distinguished. The field is the curved space. In general relativity, the gravitational field and structure, or geometry, of space are identical. They are represented in Einstein's field equations by one and the same mathematical quantity. In Einstein's theory, then, matter cannot be separated from its field of gravity, and the field of gravity cannot be separated from the curved space. Matter and space are thus seen to be inseparable and interdependent parts of a single whole. Everything in this treatise aims to integrate and extend the matter 1 and space 0 that is expressed in the general theory of relativity to all of nature. Furthermore, the aim has been to identify this duality 0 and 1 by revealing its broader significance as it applies to natural processes and human action. The binary nature of the interdependency of the 0 and 1 forms the root source of the evolution of these ideas. Einstein's general theory of relativity identifies mass 1 and space 0 as interdependent parts of a single whole. General relativity as a theory embodies a unifying and integrative approach to nature. After the general theory of relativity, Einstein spent his remaining days attempting to unify gravity and electromagnetism. Unfortunately, Einstein never accomplished this preeminent task. I believe that the unification of nature is implicit within the general theory of relativity. Once this is understood, the next large step is to apply this unifying principle of matter 1 and space 0 to everything in the microcosm and macrocosm. This binary application can be extended to all realms of nature. First, it is necessary to remove the apparent and limiting view that gravity only involves large bodies and their association with large spaces. All objects are joined together by the mass that organizes and utilizes the space inside and outside those bodies. Mass organizes space to fill space. Gravity is an expression of the matter 1 and antimatter 0 states of all objects, including objects inside the bodies of stellar systems. The geometry of space outside the large bodies is an extension of the geometry of the space inside these bodies. The gravitational attraction between large bodies, planets, stars, and galaxies is derived from and originates from all the similar ones and zeros that form the microcosmic makeup of these massive objects. When Theodore Kaluza added a fifth dimension to the general theory of relativity, both gravity and electromagnetism appeared in these equations. This is a powerful statement that the microcosm within the macrocosm of gravity also has a 0 and 1 foundation. The general theory of relativity expresses the principle behind the unification of the universe. Einstein's introduction of the geometry of space is the key for determining why matter is induced to have motion and reach position. With the understanding that mass 1 is always coupled to its spatial zero field, great advancements in science will follow. The enhanced awareness of the nature of the binary universe will provoke immense social and technological change. This integration will lead to resolving present difficulties in mathematical interpretations. For example, Schrödinger's wave function. All motion is an attraction force between zeros and ones that is directed by a repulsion force. The same attraction and repulsion that causes the motion of planets and stars also causes human motion. The force of repulsion, 0 on 0 and 1 on 1, has always been coupled with gravity's attraction, 0 to 1 and 1 to 0. Humans on the surface of the Earth are continually involved with the repulsion and attraction of mass. Inertial mass and its resistance, repulsion, to motion is the same mass involved with gravity. Gravitational mass and its attraction to its field, 0, are coupled with inertial mass and its repulsion to the mass of other objects. They work together and are dependent upon each other. For humans and all objects, the inertial force of repulsion is required for using the attraction force of gravity. The inertial force, as a repulsion force, involves inertial mass 1 and inertial non-mass 0. Inertial mass is the more apparent 1-on-1 of mass, and the inertial non-mass is the less apparent 0-on-0 of non-mass. When discussing inertial mass, it should be understood that inertial non-mass is also involved. Of necessity, all objects are a composite of both mass 1 and non-mass 0. The inertia of repulsion is always a copartner of the attraction force. Newton's F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration, shows the relationship of the two forces of repulsion and attraction. The m in the equation represents inertial mass using the force of repulsion to reach the a of acceleration due to the attraction force. Mass has two components: its initial inertia of the repulsion force followed by its acceleration in response to the attraction force. Mass uses its repulsive force of inertia to transfer motion/energy from the mass of one object to another. Repulsion, where mass cannot go one-on-one, is used to input energy for the 1-to-0 attraction force where mass can go. The resistance of mass to motion provides input motion energy, transferring energy to output motion. Input, motion's arrival, is through the force of repulsion, and output, motion's departure, is through the force of attraction. Inertial mass provides repulsion for its gravitational mass to respond by motion through its gravitational field, 0. Mass at rest is helpless in responding to attraction through energy input leading to energy output, unless mass also uses its inertial repulsion force. Mass is involved in two ways. One is with itself, one-on-one, in repulsion, inertial mass, and the other is with its attraction to its field, 0. Repulsion stops motion for the mass of objects, allowing this energy of motion to transfer to other objects in its reach for position. As we stand on Earth, the gravitational force attempts to pull us to the Earth's center, and the resistance to this is the 0-on-0 and 1-on-1 of repulsion. Our mass, 1, in opposition to the Earth's mass, 1, and our non-mass, 0, in opposition to the Earth's non-mass, 0. Human skeletal and muscle structures have evolved to adapt to this repulsion. Attraction and repulsion are opposite forces that always depend upon each other. Biological forms require repulsion to show them where they cannot go in reaching the attraction of where they can go. The change of direction by any object is dependent upon repulsion and attraction forces. The path is determined and the journey starts through the use of both forces. The destination, hole of arrival, is determined and the journey is terminated through the use of both forces. The 0 of where we can move is seen through the 1 of where we cannot move. The 1 of where we cannot move is also used to contain the 1 of us for arrival. Both forces are used to measure our weight. Gravitational attraction pulling at us and repulsion's resistance create the pressure that causes a weight scale to measure weight. Why are astronauts weightless in space? What is different about an astronaut's weight in space compared to his weight on the surface of the Earth? In outer space, astronauts have reached the motion energy that gravity's attraction force is attempting to produce at the surface of the Earth. On the Earth's surface, this attraction force pulls us toward the center of the Earth. In space, the astronaut's motion around the Earth would be like falling down a tunnel hole toward the center of the Earth. To float in orbit around the Earth is to fall around the Earth. The weightlessness of astronauts in space is not caused by canceling the gravitational effects upon them. It is caused by canceling the direct effects of the repulsion force preventing motion. Motion in orbit is reaching toward the effects of gravitational attraction. There is no longer a repulsive resistance to motion in attempting to reach position, center of the Earth. In orbit, the gravitational attraction force has started the emission stage of motion for reaching a positional state of absorption. The orbiting astronauts have been removed from the Earth's mass 1 and non-mass 0 and their direct encounter with the inertial force of repulsion. Instead of canceling gravitational effects, being in orbit cancels the direct effects of Earth's repulsion that prevent motion. Once orbit is reached, direct contact with repulsion is replaced by the motional emission stage of attraction, gravity. However, motion is still guided by the indirect force of repulsion at a distance. Note that astronauts use their own attraction force in moving into outer space in opposition to the gravitational attraction. Gravity's attraction force pulls them toward the center of the Earth, and the astronauts' attraction force pulls them toward holes above the surface of the Earth. The individual atoms of the human body want to move in one direction, and the individual person wants to move in another direction. The ones and zeros of atoms, people's atoms and Earth's atoms, are attracted to each other, while the human body's zeros and one are attracted to the ones and zeros of outer space. The attraction forces of nature depend upon structure and what that structure's zeros and ones are designed to absorb and emit. Atomic structures have their zeros and ones, and human structures have their zeros and ones. To reach holes on the surface and above the surface of the Earth, astronauts use repulsion to provide motion. Newton's third law of motion is involved with this inertial resistance of mass 1 on mass 1 and non-mass 0 on non-mass 0, and is the first step to the beginning of motion. A propeller beneath the water surface propels our vessel along a spatial path surrounded by water. Thrust is provided by the inertia of repulsion between the mass of the propeller and the mass of water, as well as the repulsion of the non-mass of propeller and the non-mass of water. In my discussion of inertial mass, it must always include inertial non-mass as a part of repulsion. Water is pushed backwards because it cannot occupy the propeller. The water in turn pushes the propeller and consequently the vessel forward because the propeller cannot occupy the water. The engine's energy, motion, has been transferred through repulsion to both the water and the vessel. This is a series of energy outputs, emission by the engine, to energy inputs, absorption, to the vessel and the water. The airplane's propeller operates on the same principle except that it acts upon the molecules of air instead of the molecules of water. The spinning of the propeller develops a force of repulsion, 0 on 0 and 1 on 1, of both propeller and air molecules against the air molecules and conversely, the air molecules against the propeller. The air molecules are pushed behind the airplane by the repulsive force of the propeller. At the same time, the air molecules repulse the propeller, pushing it forward along with the attached airplane. The propeller's motion energy is transferred through repulsion to the motion of air molecules and the airplane. This is another example of F equals ma, where the inertia of the repulsion force 0 on 0 and 1 on 1 is necessary to produce the acceleration motion used by the attraction force 1 to 0. F equals ma demonstrates the unification of the two forces of repulsion and attraction. Force in nature always involves attraction and repulsion. The astronaut's liftoff motion is launched by the energy motion flow of the ignited rocket fuel. The burning fuel's molecules are thrust backwards and out the open exhaust nozzles of the rocket ship's engines. As burning fuel is thrust backward and out of the engines, the thrust pushes the rocket ship forward. The rocket ship pushes against the burning fuel, and burning fuel pushes against the rocket ship. The motion of the burning fuel is transferred into the forward motion of the rocket ship through repulsion. The fuel's motion is directed to where it can go because of where it cannot go, and the motion of the rocket ship is directed to where it can go through the repulsion of the burning fuel. Two holes are necessary to direct the motion of the burning fuel and the motion of the rocket ship. These holes represent the space above the rocket ship and the space below the rocket ship. The dynamics of motion through attraction must always be preceded by repulsion. Our ability to stand on the Earth is the result of repulsion preventing gravitational attraction from pulling us to the center of the Earth. Humans use the repulsion of where they cannot go to propel them by attraction to their holes of choice where they can go. The orbital motion of astronauts is the stage of emission which continues through gravitational attraction. The moon's and the rocket ship's orbital motion are gravity's attempt to reach a position at the center of the Earth. The planets have the same stage of emission, but it is directed toward the center of the Sun. The Sun also moves within the galaxy because of its attraction toward the center of the galaxy. Galaxies move around their common centers of attraction. All motion is directed toward a positional goal. Repulsion is the guide for motion's attraction. The paths of motion for all objects are repelled by where they cannot go and thereby directed to where they can go. Attraction. For repulsion inside the spacecraft, the astronaut requires the 0 and 1 of the spacecraft's body to opposite the 0 and 1 of the astronaut's body. It is a form of repulsion whenever the object is used to direct the motion of another object. Every push from where we cannot go produces pressure upon ourselves and the object pushed. In outer space, a weight scale would register weight if an astronaut used it to push off to change directions. The pressure we measure as weight is the force of attraction wanting to reach motion and the force of repulsion due to the 0 on 0 and the 1 on 1 resistance preventing motion. Repulsion enables us to transfer energy, motion, at different rates in different directions. Inside the rocket ship, the motion of the attraction force for humans is simultaneous with the orbital motion of the gravitational attraction force. Two separate motions take place with their separate attractions. Motion due to humans and motion due to gravity have a separate attraction force leading to their respective motions, emission. Human motion and gravitational motion both respond to an attraction between zeros and ones. The astronaut 1 fills the zeros of the rocket ship to the ones of the rocket ship can fill the zeros of the astronaut. The repulsion force is always around us and is part of the gravitational force of attraction. All resistance is a form of repulsion used through direct contact or a response at a distance. Repulsion is used by all forms of attraction in directing and transferring motion/energy. The use of gravity's force of attraction by humans and by stars and planets would be impossible without the force of repulsion. The impossible of repulsion is used to reach the possible of attraction. Einstein recognized the necessity of a repulsion force and therefore added the cosmological constant to the general theory of relativity. This repulsive force was used to explain the balance and maintenance of what was believed to be, at the beginning of the 20th century, a static universe. It was discovered later that the universe is not static, but is expanding and does not require the inclusion of a cosmological constant. Einstein was not happy with his introduction to the cosmological constant. Nevertheless, the gravitational force of attraction cannot be operational without the force of repulsion. It is difficult to imagine a world of attraction without repulsion. The relationship between human action and repulsion has been shown. In recent developments of physics in the late 20th century, the cosmological constant has resurfaced in new mathematical models. I anticipate that future cosmologists will include repulsion as an integral part of a universal action. The Doppler effect was used to change our view of a static to an expanding universe. Currently, there are serious questions about the Doppler effect representing the major explanation of the redshift. The redshift represents an increase in the wavelength of light with increasing distances. A shift toward the red means a shift toward longer wavelengths and lower frequencies. By incorporating the 0 and 1 into wave theory, it may be possible to show that distance without expansion can also account for the redshift. Diffraction and the absorption of light 1 over great spatial 0 distances may itself cause an increase in wavelength. The Doppler effect, with its expanding universe, may not be the only way to explain this universal increasing redshift with distance. When the zero becomes an integral part of all our observations, we can make the next leap forward in approximating reality. Understanding the repulsive relationship of antimatter 0 on antimatter 0 and matter 1 on matter 1 is the key to using repulsion to direct and transfer emission energy to absorption. This involves redirecting the internal energy used by atomic matter and antimatter to human use of human matter and antimatter. The present usage of electromagnetism is a narrow application of atomic energy. Recognizing the effective role of the zero in all human endeavors is a grand solution to continuing human progress. Let us now take a few opposites that seem to be more important to us and see if this binary principle can give us a better understanding of opposites as they apply to human action.